With week 0 finally wrapping up, we finally have some real football to talk about, man. And no, let's dive right into Iowa State and Kansas State and what this will kind of be our weekly Big 12 kind of wrap up, right? We had some Big 12 teams have some action in week 0 with Iowa State and Kansas State and Kansas. So a lot to talk about, a lot to take away from these games. And we can start with the first game. Well, I will say this before we start. We're going to kind of talk about these games first, right? The Big 12 kind of wrap up, what we saw from these teams, things like that. And then how does this affect West Virginia, right? How does this somehow tie in to Mountaineer Nation? So let's start Iowa State, Kansas State. 24-21, first game of the year, Noah. Rain was pissing down in Ireland. I'm sure a lot of Guinnesses were drank by both fan bases, but only one came out happy. Iowa State takes the win 24-21, man. I mean, this game, it was like, we wanted more, right? Because it's the first game of the year and we were just ready for fireworks, football to be back. But at the same time, this is really what college football is a lot of the time, right? This was ground and pound, maybe some due to the nature of the weather, but also an identity shift with Iowa State, I think. And then what we saw and believe we will see more of this season from Kansas State. So I'll let you kind of jump right into it, Noah. Take me, whatever you want to start, man. This was a kind of an up and down game.
I thought it was kind of the week 0 jitters. You saw them there early. A lot of turnovers in the game. Was kind of a very messy game in the sense of like the 24-21. It was a very, very great game. It was a good viewer game if you're going to go on that. But if you're these fan bases and you're looking in at these two teams, you're like, man, we got a lot of things to answer. I mean, ball security is big. It is huge in college football. Can take the momentum from you. If you're the one getting those turnovers, it can take you to a place that your offense hasn't been, right? Because it can give you more possessions, so on and so forth, Gage. But looking into that game, it just, as much as it answered questions that the Big 12 is wide open, right? It kind of actually hit on to me was like, these are two of your powerhouse teams in the Big 12, Gage, right? Kansas State, Iowa State.
Probably in the top 4, right? You would think Arizona State, Texas Tech, Iowa State, Kansas State, and Baylor. I mean, I would give those 5, right? That's probably the top 5
TCU
in my opinion.
In there somewhere. I mean, maybe
somewhere in there, yeah.
So I mean, yeah, these are the teams that everybody's looking at and saying, okay, these are our guys, right? If these teams might be one of the teams representing us in the college football playoffs, and not that we know it was week 0, it's bad conditions, but I think this spoke to the level of how open the Big 12 is, Gage. I mean, it screamed to me that like there wasn't a player on that either of those teams, even though I love Rocco. I think he is a phenomenal quarterback. Gives me such like a Skylar Howard feel, like not the flashiest, just gets the job done, and that's what Rocco Beck does. But it drew more questions into those teams like, okay, these teams have weaknesses and you can't exploit them, Gage. I don't really know any other way to go with it. Like I said, ball security was a question. Iowa State definitely felt the impact of losing those 2 receivers. You could tell that. I kind of thought they wouldn't, but they did feel that. And Kansas State, are we willing to sit here and talk about, and I'll give this to you, I'll give all the credit to the world and you on this, Gage. Avery Johnson. I mean, are we ready to start having a conversation? Should there be a quarterback question there? I think there should. I really do. I don't know what's behind it, but I think there should be a question behind Avery Johnson.
Before I get into my Avery Johnson propaganda, I'll start with Iowa State because I like what you said. It seems, and visibly, I think you could see that Rocco is like head over heels the best offensive player, and that's kind of stupid to say because obviously he's the quarterback, right? But sometimes, like last year, it was like, okay, Jaden Higgins made a terrific catch, or Noel made a terrific catch. It's like you can kind of see these guys help out their quarterback in certain ways, but without Rocco, Noah, I'm not even sure Iowa State scores a point yesterday. Like, you could just tell he does everything for them. He was a willing runner. When it was 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, it was put the head down, get the extra yard, things like that. I thought he played phenomenal. I would love to talk at who the hell was recruiting receivers for Iowa State this offseason. They don't have a playmaker on the outside, Noah. And listen, we need to be fair about something. Is some of this due to the weather? Perhaps, right? It could be in the field conditions. It definitely, I'm pretty sure that Ireland Stadium is a soccer stadium, so it's a different type of grass. I had heard them talking about traction and a lot of guys switching up their cleats, like the deeper material, so they're digging into the ground more because it was holding that water. But I mean, the second half, no, there was no rain. You know what I mean? The field is dry at that point, I would imagine. Like, we kind of got to really see what they wanted to do. I understand running the ball a lot in the first half, kind of find your grounding, all that stuff. But Iowa State ran a ton of 3 tight end sets, very run heavy, and relied on the defense. And to be fair, right, their defense was pretty good out of 2 busted coverage plays, which I'll talk about when I get to Kansas State. But if you're going to play that brand of football in the Big 12, guess what? West Virginia's going to do that. There's a ton of teams that are going to do that. So from the Iowa State side, it kind of signals to me like they're not going to be a very high-powered offense. This is going to be a complete identity shift compared to last year. They're not going to be able to spread it out to Jaden Higgins, Jalen Noel, and all those guys they had last year. Now, Carter Hansen, he came out in the second half, the white running back, just steamrolling. I would imagine his yards per carry in that second half were somewhere around like 5.5. Kansas State could not stop that for shit, right? But that's all I got to say about Iowa State. It shocked me that the receiving core was kind of as weak as it was to the naked eye, I should say. I don't know. That was kind of my biggest takeaway. Flip side, you are right. I've been saying it all along. They have been trying to put Avery Johnson in this pedestal of college quarterbacks. Like, a lot of people think he's closer to Sam Levitt than he is Taven Jackson, who's playing for UCF, right? I just don't see it. I never did. And K-State fans, if you're watching this, I mean, how do you not win that game, right? How do you watch that game and not win? And you can say, well, how is Avery Johnson the problem? He threw for 273 yards and 2 touchdowns. If you take away the 2 kind of busted plays, one, I'll give it to him, right? I guess like a pump fake up the middle seam touchdown. He only threw for 171 yards. I mean, and it was just evident, Noah, you could see he doesn't have very good touch on short yardage throws. I don't see it as a upper echelon, like top tier college quarterback. Yeah, pocket presence. Like, I don't know.
Pocket presence was not there, and I think that's where you kind of seen the game kind of shift. Rocco finally started to feel pressure, kind of towards that second half, and started to get on the ground and start running the football when they were bringing pressure to him. I think that was your biggest difference in the game, Gage, was Rocco started to feel that, and I think that game was won at the quarterback position, Gage, and I think Rocco was the better player, and that's why Iowa State came out with that win.
And I don't know. Maybe I'm being bullish on Kansas State. No, I just didn't see a ton that I liked, and some of that is due to the fact that Dylan Edwards got hurt on that muff punt, and he didn't even play a single snap on offense. Right? He's obviously their big playmaker that they're expecting to carry a huge bulk of that offense with Avery Johnson. They're a very run-heavy team. We know that, but on the outside is playmakers, right? Jerron Bradley, who had the long touchdown, only 3 catches, 75 yards. He busted off that big kind of busted coverage touchdown. Jace Brown looks like they want to kind of use him as that playmaker on the outside, whether it's sweeps, rushes. Looks like a decent little route runner, everything like that. So I kind of like what I saw from him. But I mean, when Edwards went down, right, their backup running back, Joe Jackson, came in, and it was just, they couldn't even run the ball. Their offense was shot directly from that. And I mean, I think Iowa State, honestly, could have held them to 14 points, obviously with the 2 plays that resulted in touchdowns. But yeah, it's week 0. We understand that, but that's kind of my full wrap up of that game. It's like, I wasn't really impressed with either team. I really wasn't.
Hey, Gage, when you get into this and you look back at the teams that have started out of country to play, usually that team that loses goes on a skid. I don't know if it's, getting back into the country and trying to get things, trying to fix things, but also the guys are tired because they went, did some foreign travel. I'm not sure, but usually these teams, look at Florida State last year, lost to Georgia Tech early. Florida State was a playoff contender coming into the year, and then you see them win. They won 2 games last year, Gage? So they win 2 games last year. Year before that, I forget the team, but also it's very hard. I think ESPN showed a stat yesterday. They're like 30 games under 500, the teams that lost that game. And obviously, Florida State didn't help that total at all last year, dropping 10 games. But, I mean, it is very, very concerning for Kansas State. And then I don't know if you saw on Twitter, Gage, but Avery Johnson's father and son, or Avery Johnson's brother, in the skirmish out there outside of the stadium. Very interesting there. Might be some trouble in Kansas or Kansas State.
It's that typical, like, it's the typical thing where you have a lot of expectations coming into the year, right? Kansas State is one of these teams where it's like, hey, we have a chance to make the college football playoffs this year, right? A lot of excitement in week 0 where the first game, and then you come out and lose. And sometimes, Noah, if you don't have this good culture, right, where you spend all this time in camp leading up to the season, if you don't have that culture, this type of loss turns into this right here, right? A ton of finger pointing. Oh, it's your fault. You know what I mean? It's just a lot of choice words in the locker room after. I said it before. A lot of guys are like, "Why did I transfer here? Am I in the right spot? Why didn't I play?" Like, it's just a lot of that negativity stuff, and I think that really leads to what you said about why that total is so under 500 for those teams. Losing your first game is crucial, man. You have to just get off to these quick starts in college football to gain momentum and confidence as a team.
It
And we'll
allows
see
you to
what
drop it. It allows you to drop a game later in the season. Gage is what it does by starting early season undefeated. You can lose one later, and it's not that big of a deal.
Absolutely. Thankfully enough for Kansas State, their next 2 games are North Dakota and Army before starting Big 12 play versus Arizona. So it'll be interesting to see how that looks on the flip side, just because I got it pulled up. And I'll tell you real quick, Iowa State's next 2 games, South Dakota, and then versus Iowa, which will kind of be an interesting game to watch there in week 3. Will technically be their week. Will be their week 3, week 2 of like college football. But yeah, 100%, man. So let's flip over to the other Big 12 team that played, Noah. I'll let you kind of jump on this from the gun because you have a take about this. Let's talk Jalen Daniels and Kansas kind of steamrolling Fresno State.
Yeah, I was very, very impressed with Jalen Daniels as a passer yesterday. It seemed like he kind of understood what he was doing wrong last year. There were so many questions around the amount of times he turned the ball over last year. Didn't seem that way this year. Watching this first game of the season. But what I got to tell you, Gage, is you were playing a lesser opponent in Fresno State. Not saying Fresno State isn't a good football team because they did show a lot yesterday. At times, it looked like they were moving the ball well, and then something happened, right? Whether Kansas was playing that well or they were just on miscues, only the coaches will know the answer to that question, right? But when you look into Kansas and what they were doing, identity-wise, looked like a lot of motion, a lot of misdirection. Those things are all really cute, really, really nice, right? But whenever you have guys that can get after the passer and you want Jalen Daniels to sit back there for 6-7 seconds and deliver a football, it draws. It's so crazy to me that he has injury, a lot of concerns in the injury department. He's been injured a lot. And they're running him, Gage. Kansas is running him continuously. I'm very questionable. I thought they looked really good in the sense that they looked really good. They looked polished, right? But who shouldn't? He's played 6 years of college football, right? He should be a polished veteran quarterback,
Yeah.
right? So that's what he showed yesterday. And I was very, very glad to see that because, I think he could be a very, very solid quarterback. But the problem is they're putting him in positions. Kansas is putting him in positions that if he doesn't watch out, he is going to be a concern to stay healthy all year again. You kind of set your program. You took your program back a year because you're not letting these younger guys play, and he was able to get that 6-year eligibility, which I'm grateful for him. Grateful that he got that for himself. But you have to kind of put him in bubble wrap and know that he is a very key piece to this offense, right? Him being able to get out of the pocket and create plays. That's a big thing in your offense, and that's what kind of draws question to me too. A lot in this, Gauge, is there were a lot of times yesterday that Fresno State was getting after the quarterback, and if Jalen Daniels wasn't there and wasn't as athletic as he was to get out of the pocket to create, there would have been some question marks there, 3 and out, so on and so forth. So Kansas is another team that I think the ESPN, they kind of actually did hit on these guys. I think they were their 6th or 7th ranked coming into the Big 12.
Right
I think that's where they're gonna. I think that's where they're going to end up. I don't see a lot of boom potential out of them because I think there's a lot of question marks in this offense whenever you start getting into the whole thing. And then defensively, I think E.J. Warner, Kurt Warner's son, there were some passes that he were making that he's just throwing the ball up in the middle of the field and their guy runs under it, and Kansas isn't anywhere around. Like I said, Fresno State would get the ball to the 40-yard line of Kansas, and then it would just stop. And I don't, like I said, maybe Kansas was tightening things up. I don't know, but there were some question marks around Kansas. I think right in the middle is where you're going to see Kansas end. That's just my early season prediction, Gage. You got anything to go on with that?
Yeah, I think you said it best on the offensive side. I just wanted to talk. Obviously, it's Fresno State, but I was expecting a little bit more of a push from them. So I'll give a little bit of praise to the Kansas defense in this game. They kind of surprised me a little bit because we bet on Fresno State some alt totals plus 17.5 and plus 21 plus 21.5. It looked like the Kansas defensive line was a lot better than I expected, which we know everything really starts in the trenches in football in general. So that one kind of surprised me. Mountaineer Nation will be. I was going to say Mountaineer Nation will be familiar with Trey Latham. 8 total tackles in that game yesterday. Half of a TFL. So yeah, I mean it's one of those things where if we compare this to West Virginia, right? This is the game. This is a similar game of West Virginia versus Ohio, right? That's basically the playing field that you're on. Kansas versus Fresno State, but. Yeah, definitely interesting. I'm not really going to talk too much about it because I think you kind of hit everything about Kansas. So I will kind of start the last segment of how does this kind of affect West Virginia from what we've saw, right? We obviously know it's early. Things change over the season. I just think the biggest takeaway and the one thing for me is if media and everybody in the Big 12 was deeming Iowa State and Kansas State, these two teams that were just crazy above the rest of the teams in Big 12, right? They're just so far ahead of West Virginia's and UCF and just all these teams at the bottom of the pack. It's like, come on, man. I think the gap is a lot closer than what these people are trying to make it out to be. And I understand you have to push this agenda of like, hey, we need one Big 12 team to kind of come out on top and compete with the SECs and things like that. To me, it's not Iowa State and it's not Kansas State. It's, to me, it's still obviously probably going to be Arizona State or Baylor if I had to guess, and Texas Tech, my pick to win the Big 12. But bro, it's not Kansas State and Iowa State. I'm telling you right now, I was not impressed at all with either.
Yeah, I think both of those teams are still, like we kind of hit on earlier, especially because we got to watch like Kansas is a lot harder to judge. From what we're taking away from it because they didn't play another opponent that you're familiar with. But when you look at those two teams, Iowa State and Kansas State, I just think there isn't that big of a. They're searching for their identity still because I don't know. Obviously there's some playmakers lost on the outside of Iowa State. Kansas State even lost Giddens last year, who's NFL running back now. So there are a lot of questions as to where they go from here. I'm not saying that either of these teams are going to have a down year, but I don't see that being, the narrative surrounding college football, especially after that showing in week 1 that either of these teams are going to be on that stage at the end of the year, college football playoff wise. Could completely be wrong, but just looking at it, I didn't see anything that, like you said, if you have to go out and play Texas or you have to go out and play Ohio State or
not a chance. You're not going to stand a chance. We're not sitting here saying that West Virginia would stand a chance versus those teams either. That's not what we're doing. This isn't kind of just a homer video, right? We understand we're realistic with things, but I'm just saying, like, in terms of Big 12, right? Those are not the Big 12 in general. That gap is obviously way closer than maybe it ever has been before. If those are two of the top teams, right? So I don't know. That's kind of my biggest takeaway. So guys, we appreciate you watching. This is definitely kind of a newer video. It's not as self-centered about Mountaineer football. So if you've watched to this point, make sure to leave a comment on how we can improve, right? If you would kind of like us to dive more in game, if you didn't get a chance to watch or you're watching another game, you want to kind of know more about what actually happened in the game, let us know. Or just ways in general we can improve these videos and kind of just give an overview of Big 12 as we kind of lead up to West Virginia playing these teams. Obviously, West Virginia plays Kansas State, correct, but not Iowa State. I could be wrong.
I believe they play. They don't play Iowa State. I don't think they play either of these teams.
I was to say I don't think they play either. Now that I'm thinking about it, but it is what it is, man. It's for the love of football, right? It is for the love of football. I meant to say they play Kansas. I got way too. I was still talking about Iowa State and Kansas State. They play Kansas. That's what I meant to say. So kind of got to look at what Jalen Daniels and that team is going to look like because that's going to come up fairly quick, right? I mean, that's week 4 right after Pitt. So we appreciate you guys watching. Make sure you leave a thumbs up, comment, subscribe, everything in between. We'll see you in the next one, man.